happens? I mean, we talk about some of the people that might not be interested to transition. How about the ones where, it makes sense for you, but there's the hesitation and possibly procrastination to actually move forward? How do you, you deal with a lot of investors as well. Like, how do you sort of guide them through? Because you're not that you put them through, like, how do you guide them through this process of going, yeah, I really want to explore it. Yeah, I really want to do it, but I don't know how.
Ultimately,
and I don't know if I should.
It's a big mindset change when you are thinking about taking that transition, especially like people on PAYG income earners who are resisting change or have the risk appetite but are resisting change as to, okay, I want to move in that direction. One thing to understand and note that is no matter how good your team is, I'll use a cricket as an example. No matter how good a team is, you would not always hit a six or a boundary on every ball. And so every property that you're going to acquire is not going to give you 40% growth or 80% growth. There would be properties in your portfolio that does not perform, or there would be properties that outperform everything else, but then there would be properties that are just dud, okay? And so if you're doing it yourself, and if you're not fast enough to remediate these properties basically overshadow the good returns, because then your overall portfolio becomes a mediocre portfolio like anyone else. And so if you are taking decent risk, then the idea is to kill that dependence on the serviceability and join others in generating, bigger wealth. And so when you're resisting change, what you're resisting is that generational wealth that we are talking about. You're resisting you going into that sort of mindset of, okay, I want to keep moving forward. And so you don't hear the bank saying no and then just do nothing, right? You go into that mode of, okay, I have a property in my portfolio that can be developed. Let's pull it out. Let's add more equity. Let's manufacture equity and keep moving forward. The other thing...
And what about, I was going to say, sorry, Moss, it's in terms of, business owners as well. We talk about on our actual business side of things. Where does it make sense that they start to look at, doing something else, and what are the implications of them not doing it?
Yeah, and so naturally, when you are, doing buy and hold, you are at that phase of either hitting maturity in your portfolio or having a portfolio that is not efficient enough to generate the yields or the growth that you are intending to get. And so the banks have said no to you and you can't transition it out. And so if you don't have a strategy in place, if you haven't thought this through, then you are stuck. And so the only strategy that you would follow is, okay, I need to sell something out of my portfolio, or just suck it up and, ride the wave, be it interest rate rising, right?
Yeah.
And so for people to transition, it's important that you have these properties in your portfolio where you can manufacture the equity and still keep moving the profile forward. Okay, so you don't get stuck into anything. When you have a sustainable property portfolio, I'll use a very simple example from one of my clients' perspective. And so they had the portfolio at the start when they started off. One of the properties that they had in their portfolio was quite bad and performed and did nothing over the last sort of 7 years. They bought something in 2015, did nothing for them, all the way up to 2022. They had some properties that did really well, but that particular property didn't do anything well. And so they were stuck from a bank's perspective that there is no serviceability, they can't move forward. And so their natural instinct was, okay, I'll sell the bad eggs, right? Because that's what you do. You don't want to sell the good stuff. You want to sell the bad stuff. But, just like you bought the bad stuff at the wrong time, no one wants to buy a bad stuff, because there is a lot of educated investors out there who knows that, okay, this is not an investment grade property. And so they spend close to about $8,000 speaking to 2 agents, marketing it again and again, trying to sell it, right?
Yeah,
and so when they came to me, super frustrated, banks keep saying no, and they are super stuck. And so my question to them was, yes, you want to get rid of this, but there are these 2 other properties. Have you thought about how to push the yields on some of these properties, right? And so one of these properties was in Perth, and so we looked at that property, we helped them convert their property and push the yield literally from 4% all the way to 8.5%. Okay, and so that gave them a bit of liquidity on their borrowing side of things, and that gave them enough money to basically say, okay, how do we now look at this property, which is a bad property, and offload it? And so over the period of, I think, 6 months or 8 months time, they put plans on their property to make it a bit more nicer. Okay, staged the property and then offloaded it on a 6-month settlement, and that property basically settled mid last year, and that was the way that the property portfolio was remediated while pushing the yields up on their already, and I call it manufactured equity again. And so developments doesn't have to be with a big bang, and now they have liquidity and the serviceability to play forward. And so these are the properties that we're talking about. Yeah. And so when you're talking about transitions, you're talking about taking the next step, continuously moving in the same direction rather than feeling stuck. There is a lot of people that I'm talking to, especially right now in a scenario like this, where they've caught a lot of growth. Okay, in this particular client that I'm thinking about, they've caught so much growth in their portfolio, but because there were always cash flow strain, they are feeling the burn. And now every property is costing them close to about 14, and one property in itself costing about $18,000 a year to hold. And so they're like,
ouch.
Like 3 properties in total is costing them like close to about $60,000. Okay. And I was like, well, that's a lot of money, right? Because this is disposable income that you're paying out to hold these properties. And now, so their instinct is, okay, I can't do anything with these properties because I need to sell in order to salvage. And again, same mentality. I'll find the worst property to sell so that I can get out. But that worst property, no one wants to buy. And so you need to break that cycle. And the cycle only gets broken by having properties that you can manufacture equity on. And so we've talked about, the risks. We've talked about, where it makes sense for people to transition. We've talked about what happens to people who resist the change. But it's important to understand how to transition from these buy and hold strategies to buy and develop strategies. Now, of course, it's continuous improvement. It's baby steps, right? And so the key point where we start is always buy and hold. It's not so much about, you thinking that, you're going to start with development, right? Everyone, when you start off your property journey, it has to be, as a first-time investor, it has to be buy and hold, right?
Oh, I mean, I guess we've heard some people who have gone from, they just dive straight in, and it might be renovation or anything. I'd say the majority of us start off with, and that's what we've been told, buy a property, rent it out, or buy a property, live in it. I mean, Australians love absolute love affair with property. But let's say the majority of us start off with buy and hold. So you're sort of first time investors, and you're just getting used to this whole idea of servicing, paying off, principal and interest, all the basics of property and finance. Like it's the baby steps, right? So
yes,